Welcome into your Tiny Week Ahead reading. I'm T from Tiny Divinations, coming in to break down the cards with you. So, as usual, we have three different piles. Choose the pile or piles that resonate for you, and I will see you in your reading. Welcome in pile one. Let's get into your cards. So, the first card you chose is House. The next card we have is Janet Frame. Show you this one a little bit closer. Belonging. And then we have Gertrude Stein, Perspective. And I'm using the Literary Witches Oracle for this reading. I always tell y'all I'm going to put it in and I forget to put it in, so let me just show you. Okay, so getting into the energy of our week. The energy of this week feels like it's about where we feel like we belong, where we feel the most comfortable, places that we've been put in that may no longer feel like home or feel like we're the most comfortable there, who feels like home, where you feel like you belong, right? Where you come from also comes a little bit into mind with this as well, but this is part of the energy of the week. The house energy runs deep in this reading. What's interesting is that we have all three of these cards that have some reference to a house, right? Um, we have the first card being an actual house representing like stability and, comfort, where you belong, where your belongings are, your foundation, your stability. Then you have Janet Frame, and to me, the last name Frame made me think of the frame of a house when you're building a house. Again, the foundations, what it's being built on, the things that you are um, have learned or have been ingrained in you, and like how you build your life, but literally also your home and like the foundations that your home are built on in terms of the materials, but also in terms of like um how you've put the things together, or like the people that have been put in place in the space. You know what I mean? It's like also the construction of a home, not just like um the figurative idea of a home. You know what I mean? It's also the figurative idea of the construction of the things that bring you comfort, or spaces that you feel comfortable, or things like that. So that's where that came in for me. Also, within just the deck, Janet Frame was an author. And what's interesting about the idea of her home is that she was in a psychiatric ward for a large part of her life, especially when she was very young. And so, in her situation, her home was not somewhere that she got to choose initially, right? And then when she was older and got out of the situation, and became more famous and got more money, she actually lived a life of seclusion. And so she finally got to choose her home and choose her space. And so there's this energy this week also of choosing where you feel most comfortable, or where you feel like you belong, or in some instances, building that space for you, right? We then have Gertrude Stein, who, again, Gertrude Stein is another author. Gertrude Stein is from America, but she actually moved to Paris and built her home and life there. Even within her home, they talk about how she used to have parties in her Parisian parlor, and so she'd invite people into her home. She made it very much what she wanted it to look like. She brought in people that she felt comfortable with, or that brought in a certain vibe that she wanted, you know what I mean? And so there's definitely this energy of you choosing, and the card that she has is Perspective, and the card that Janet Frame, the bottom words are Belonging. So it's this energy of you choosing and designing and building these spaces and places, and where you recognizing where you haven't, or where they no longer fit with where you want to be, or where you feel like you belong, and really digging into that this week. This also feels very literal to me, in the sense that like this energy this week may be about taking care of your home, cleaning things out in your home, clearing out the energy, putting in protections, putting in sweetness, putting in wellness. The week that I'm recording this is actually the 31st is on Friday, the 1st is on Saturday. So if you're somebody who it's your traditions to do something at the end of the month, or do something at the beginning of the month to bring in certain things, to clear out certain things, then it's time to do that. For example, it's in my tradition to burn onion peels at the end of the month, and then to do something to sweeten in the beginning of the month, whether that's blowing cinnamon through your door or doing a sweet floor wash or things like that. So if that's something that is in your practice or you feel called to do, then definitely do that, or learn more about, what those things look like so that you can incorporate them into your week this week. And just bringing it back, like I said before, there's this energy of um, being around the people who make you feel like home or make you feel the most comfortable as well. You have this person in the Gertrude Stein card that has their hands on her. They look like companions. You have these little fairies in the background for the Janet Frame card. So I feel like there's some energy this week to be around people that make you feel comfortable, be around friends, be around people that like make you feel like home, or you feel comfortable in their home, going to their home, inviting them to your home. Like there's some aspects of community um and like being around each other this week too. So let's get into some more specific aspects of what may happen this week. Okay, so to get more about what specific may happen this week, we're going to use the numerology guidance cards and the clarity deck. So I'm going to start with the clarity deck. And again, we're just getting to looking to see if what more specific things may happen. Okay. This one's floating away. So the first card we have is consider the source. You are receiving strong messages from someone. How is what they're saying uniquely connected to who they are and what they're about? Do you respect and admire their choices and behaviors or not? Consider the source of these messages as you evaluate them and decide how you want to relate to and learn from them in this moment. Then we have family, sidekick. Who is waiting to help you here? What must shift in order to receive help? Then wandering. What are your feelings, belief, or stories about the act of aimlessly wandering? How does this give you an important insight into thoughts and patterns that keep you stuck? And the last thing we have is rage. What are you angry about? What does this anger point you in the direction of priorities? Excuse me. How does this anger point you in the direction of priorities that need attention? Whether it's because they have shifted, need protecting, or asked to be revisited. So, starting with consider the source. In terms of specific events that may happen this week, the first thing that the consider the source gives me, especially because it's next to the family, makes me think that some people are getting into it from like the other side, from ancestors very specifically, and they're trying to send you messages, or they're trying to talk to you, or they're giving you like signs and signals or something, and you're either like not paying attention to it, or you're second guessing what you see, right? And so I feel like there are people that need to pay attention to this. Like consider the source in terms of like how this is coming to you, how random it is, right? What it could specifically relate to, who it could specifically relate to, and actually sitting with that as if it's a real ass thing, okay? Because that this is a part of the message for some people, and because we have the like home aspect, for some people it's happening in your house, like very specifically in your house, okay? The other thing we have with consider the source with the family next to it, for some people there are ideas that you have that are counter to how your family thinks, or ideas you have that may be counter to how somebody specifically thinks or what they think that you should do, or something that you want to do that people have opinions about or something like that. And so part of this is about should you listen to them or should you not listen to them? Should you be taking advice from this person if they either haven't been in the situation or have skewed views on this, or there's some kind of trauma surrounding them and the situation and you, or does this person actually have your best interest at heart? They've thought it through in ways that you can't see. They have a different perspective that you actually need to take in and recognize, right? Part of why I say that is the bottom card that we had, that I wasn't really looking at until I started thinking about this, was advisors. Who do you need to listen to more right now? Who do you need to listen to less right now? How can you make this happen? Okay. And so, again, part of the energy we had this week is about comfort. It's about places that make you feel like home. And in some instances, the places that make you feel like home are the places that shelter you and protect you the most. And so there's instances of people feeling like um, some of the ways that they think or their perspective is the most protective or is the smartest way or something like that. And it's up to you to really sit with if it is for you or if it isn't you know then the next card you have is the sidekick. So again, there's energy here for there actually to be real good information, real good planning, help from somebody else, but you just got to decipher if it is or if it isn't. Some criticism is constructive, some is not, right? So like that's part of the energy that feels like it comes up specifically this week in terms of like things that may happen that you're already thinking about wanting to do, that you may bring up to somebody wanting to do. If you sit with yourself, you may not want to bring it up to somebody because they don't feel like home, they won't make you feel the most comfortable, or there are people that specifically that as you're thinking about this change or whatever it is you're trying to do, that you can talk to, right? Then it brings me to the rage in a sense. I'm gonna get back to the wandering, but like there are people again where you have these conversations with that are counter to you that may bring you to this place of feeling anger, right? But then like the card says, what are you actually angry about? Are you angry because this person is right and it's just upsetting you because you really want to do what you want to do but you know that they're right? Are you angry because this person always shoots down your ideas, and so really what is disappointing to you is the fact that they are always like this, or the fact that you brought this to them and now they've put a damper on how you feel about it, or like something like that. You know what I mean? Like there's a deeper issue in terms of the rage, and it may have to do with one of these things that we talked about. It also may have to do with feeling like you're in a place that you don't want to be, or you no longer belong, or that you've been forced to be in. You know what I mean? Or that you don't feel comfort, because that's also part of the energies of this week. Okay. And then we have wandering. What are your feelings and beliefs or stories about the act of aimlessly wandering, right? So part of it is for some people, again, where do you feel home? Where do you feel the most comfort? If you don't feel comfortable here, how can we change that? What does change look like for you? Are you scared of change? Do you not know what aimlessly wandering looks like? Does that feel scary to you? You know what I mean? And then again, how does this give you an important insight into your thoughts and patterns that are keeping you stuck, or how you are in a space that's keeping you stuck, right? Because again, part of the energy this week is really about comfort. It's about being in spaces and places that you feel the most comfortable, that you feel the most you, that you feel like you belong. And so if that's not something that you feel, this is part of the question that we need to be sitting with and asking ourselves. This is part of what we need to be digging into. Okay. So let's move on. I'm actually going to move to the numerology cards and see if there's anything specific um, in terms of this deck. I'm not really getting too much except for the parenting card, which again brings back in the family aspect. So it may be, again, your family, it may be your children, it may be the collective parenting that we do of each other as like friends and intermediaries. This also gives the energy of like parenting your parent. So that may come up this week. And then the bottom card is personal growth. So again, there's this just energy of like where you feel the most comfortable. Some people need to change where they feel the most comfortable because you don't. Some people need to find where you feel the most comfortable. Some people need to make it more their own and like sit in it and luxuriate in their space a little bit more. Okay. So this is the energy that I get for this week in terms of these cards. Let's end your reading with some words of wisdom. Okay. So for your words of wisdom, we are using the Motivation Manifesto. Okay. Let us not forget that our simple efforts and daily triumphs can gather weight and motion to become an unstoppable force toward a focused and free life. And then you have, we must ask if our desires to feel safe and accepted are in fact enslaving us to popular opinion and to boredom. Mm, all right. All right, pile one, that is your reading for this week. Let me know what you think. Let me know how your week is going. Definitely comment on this reading, share it if you know somebody that needs a word. Okay. If you'd like your own reading, definitely book with me, wildheartbotanica.com. I have two different offerings. I'm adding a third before the month is through. If you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to my Substack channel at Tiny Divination so you can get our monthly readings, our fairy tale readings, and all our other one-off podcast episodes. And follow me on all of the socials, IG and TikTok at Tiny Divination. So thank y'all so much for reading with me. I appreciate you so much. If you have another pile, I will see you there. If not, I will see you in your next reading. Welcome in pile two to your week ahead reading. Let's get into your cards. So the card that you chose is Doll. The next card that you have is Toad. And then the next card you have is Wall. So the energy of your week seems to be all about appearances to me. What is seen and what is not seen, right? We have the doll, and with the doll, my first thought was like being put together. Dolls are usually chose based on their appearance, their functionality sometimes, but usually it's based on their appearance, how they look, how they're dressed, how somebody else identifies with them, right? They're usually very made up and very prim and pretty. Then you have the toad, and even though it's a toad, my first thought was like the princess and the frog, and how the frog was really a prince the whole time, and she turned into a frog, and she was really a princess. You know what I mean? She was really a person, but disguised as these toads, or excuse me, as these frogs. So that is, even though the toad is a toad and not a frog, I get that they're different things. That's what it made me think of. So again, it put me in a place of thinking about like appearances, things not being as they seem, or something being hidden behind a shell of something or a cover of something, right? Which then takes me to Wall. And so again, appearances, what you can see, what you can't see. You know what I mean? You can see what's around the wall, but you may not be able to see what's behind that bitch. And that's important to you making decisions, or to you planning, or having the most information. You know what I mean? So there's something about this week with the energy that deals with your appearance, the appearance of others, how you see yourself, how others see you, and or things that are walled or hidden or masked in a way. So within that, in terms of how this relates to us specifically, in some cases it's about who you are when you take your mask off, who you are when you bring your walls down, right? Have you considered that you've been walking around wearing a mask? Have you considered how high your walls are? Have you considered that may be blocking yourself off from things, or that not showing yourself how you really are to people or to the world is doing a disservice to you or hindering you in some way? Do you consider how you may be, like I said, wearing a mask or wearing a disguise, right? Or not really seeing yourself the way that you should be seeing yourself? These are all kind of questions that come up in this pile this week. There may be parts of yourself that you're hiding from yourself, and these things may come up to you this week. You may be more reflective of the ways in which you're not sitting in yourself, or you don't show yourself in certain situations or to certain people. And then this is a time to then dig into why you may feel the need to code switch, or you may feel the need to present yourself as something other than you normally would present yourself as. Or if you present yourself normally as something and you're starting to recognize that that's not who you would be, or how you would present yourself if you were really sitting fully in yourself. Like, these are some of the things that are things that we need to sit with and come to an understanding about. You know what I mean? Like the parts of yourself that you hide from not only other people, but there may be parts of yourself that you hide from you. And that may be whether um, there are things that you feel like you're not supposed to show, right? In terms of the doll, I have to keep up certain appearances. So I can't show these things because I have to be prim and proper, or I have to seem like I have it all together, or I have to keep on this whatever the label is appearance. So if it's like, more feminine or more masculine, or whatever the label could be, it could be like oldest daughter or oldest son, or I have to keep up the label of like, person who can handle it all and doesn't need any help or doesn't need to talk to anybody about it, or blah blah blah, whatever the um the image that has been portrayed is, what I mean, that may not exactly be who you are. But then we have the walls, and so there's parts of ourselves that may be hidden or that we hide from others because we're just not in a place of being vulnerable, or we don't know how to be vulnerable, or we're scared to let those things down because we may not know how they're going to react to them, or we have a certain negative connotation or reaction to them, and so that's part of why we also don't want to show it to other people, and we're projecting the feelings that we have onto how they may react to it, right? So like all of these things are part of the energy to me that comes up this week. Let me get some more cards. Oh, also, before we move on, the other thing that came up was there's something, because we have these cards that deal with like things being obscured or things not exactly being as they are, or not being able to see everything as it is. There's this energy that like this week there may be a situation or situations where you don't have all the information, or where things seem like one thing but it's actually something else, right? Or that you're not seeing someone as they are. Okay, and so I want y'all to be mindful of that this week, and I also want you to make sure within that energy that we're putting in our protections, that we're being mindful of protections, that we're being mindful of people that we interact with and that we meet, that we're paying attention to everything that people say, we're paying attention to the things that they don't say. You know what I mean? We're asking questions. We're not just assuming things about people based on who you want them to be or who you are. You know what I mean? Like this is all things that come up this week, as well as the idea that like we are putting in boundaries, right? So there for some people are ways in which you aren't acting like yourself, which then allows you to have your boundaries moved, right? The line gets moved, and it's 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 just time to really sit with that this week, because if you don't, I feel like there's situations this week where shit will pop off because of it. Okay, and again, this is not for everybody necessarily, but it's very very palpable to the energy this week. So it's definitely going to happen for some people. Okay. So now let's pull some more cards and see more specific energies that may come up. Before we get into the specific energies that may come up, I just want to show y'all the first deck that we use is the Literary Witches Oracle. I know a lot of times I say I'm going to put the decks in. I forget sometimes. I apologize. But like, let me just let y'all know. Here it is. Okay. So for the next part, for the more specific things we have going on this week, we will be using the Clarity deck and the numerology guidance cards. Okay. So I'm going to start with the Clarity deck to see what are some more specific things that may happen this week for pile 2. Inner sight. So we have inner sight, the artist, shrinking, risks, and storyteller. Okay, so getting into our cards, we have inner sight. You already know the answer. Say it out loud. Towards what within, towards what within it do you have resistance? What do you want to do about this? The artist. How could you be more creative here? What's keeping you from being more creative? How will you work with this blockage? We then have shrinking. Where are you making yourself smaller than you naturally are? Where do you feel a need to shrink yourself down to fit? What is this here to teach you? And what do you want to do about it? Okay. So within the first line, we have this, you already know the answer, say it out loud. Towards what within you do you have resistance? So that lets me know that the things that we were talking about before, you kind of have either been thinking about this already, it's been coming up for you, it's been shit that you've like kind of had flashing at you in terms of things that we need to sit with, or the ways in which those things have been coming up. And so it's just a matter of you sitting with it, not judging it, realizing it's just information, and recognizing these things so that you can sit in your more authentic self, right? Or so that you can take these masks off. You then have the artist. How could you be more creative here? What's keeping you from being more creative? How will you work through this blockage? Again, the idea to me with the creativity or the artist really has to do with the authenticity of it, allowing yourself to create, allowing yourself to be without um, boundaries, or without being too rigid, or without the the rules and regulations, especially of other people, the things that have been put on you. Okay. How will you work with this blockage? Again, that's us sitting with what's actually happened and really going through it, right? Also, within these things, the insight in the artist says to me that this week, some specific things that may come up are situations where you intuitively know what to do, and your ego may have you questioning it, or fear may have you questioning, but you know intuitively, either before it happens or right when it happens, what you're supposed to do. And I need y'all to sit with that, right? You then have the artist. And so there are other things that come up this week where you may have either creative projects to do where you feel like you don't know how to finish it, or you don't know where to go with it, or you don't know what to do. Or there could be situations where you're finding yourself revisiting situations that you know you really wanted to do at one point, and you're not sure, like, how did we get to the point where we're blocked with this, or how did we get to the point where we're not finishing this? How do I get back to doing this, or how do I get back into this? You know what I mean? That's also part of the energy that comes up this week. We then have shrinking. Where are you making yourself smaller than you naturally are? Where do you, excuse me, where do you feel a need to shrink yourself down to fit? And we talked about this in terms of the math, in terms of trying to fit into the, doll label or the box that people are putting you in, and really having to sit with where you're doing that and why you're doing that. Is that being asked of you? Are you assuming that you have to do that to be palatable, to be accepted? Was that something that comes from a different relationship that you're bringing into this dynamic? Like, these are all things to really pay attention to, because again, if shrinking is coming up and we already talked about it, then it suggests that specifically this week there are going to be instances where you make yourself smaller and you come to resent it, or you recognize where you've been making yourself smaller, and again, you want to change that or bust out of that, or you feel a way about the fact that you've been doing that to yourself. And so these are things to think about, especially hearing them now, knowing them. Um, if before the fact, then you know how, these are things that are going to come up, and this is something to actually sit with, and how you can comfortably take up space, right? If this is something that comes up after the fact for you, then let this be validation that you no longer want to sit in that small space, that you no longer want to box yourself in, and that there's something that we need to change about this, right? Part of what that might look like is taking risks, right? Actually doing things that are opposite of what you would normally do, moving in ways that are counter, or like bolder, or more brash in a sense that you may normally move, right? Or saying yes to things that you normally wouldn't say yes to, because you feel like you don't, you're not allowed to, in a way. Like, that's what spirit just said to me. There's ways in which you stop yourself from doing things because you almost feel like you're not allowed to do that, or I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be doing that, or something like that. And again, this is like these outside things that have been put on you in terms of what you think you're supposed to do, whether that's societally or familiar, like from your family, or just things that you've started to ingrain within yourself because you've been like eating your fears and anxieties, and then that's turned into habit, or you know what I mean, real perspective. Okay. So that's something to think about. And then the last card we have is, what story do you tell yourself about this area of your life? And so that'd be like who you are, or where you're putting up walls, or where you have your mask, or, where you've been pushed on your boundaries. Where does the story originate? And what meaning do you make of this? And again, like I said, part of these things come from the things that you've told yourself and the stories that you've created. Part of these things have been told to you by other people and the stories and things that they've put on you. And so we really just got to get to the heart this week specifically. It will come up. And in some cases, it may come up because somebody's literally telling a story or recalling something that, triggers you to think, like, oh shit, that's why I'm like this, or this is where this stems from, or something like that. And then that's a catalyst for us to again dig deeper into what's going on. Okay. I'm just going to pull from the numerology guidance and see if there's anything specific for us to work on this week. Yeah, we get individuality. Okay, so I just feel like that wraps up everything that we were just talking about. On the bottom of this is actually personal growth, which is funny because we got that for pile one. And so, yeah, this week is very much about you sitting in you, being okay with being you, figuring out what the fuck that looks like, and, really owning that shit. So, this is what I got four specifics in terms of this week. Let's end your reading with your words of wisdom. Okay. And ending with your words of wisdom for this week. Our words of wisdom for this week are: we must not lose the urgency of this moment, as it begs for us to begin something grand and important. It is very much time to step into who you are and what that looks like, and not to let any more time go by before you do. So, this is your reading for this week, pile two. I hope this makes a lot of sense to you. Please let me know how your week is. Comment, let me know how the reading was. If you are not already subscribed to the YouTube, subscribe. If you'd like your own reading, book with me at wildheartbotanica.com. I have 2 reading options right now. I'm adding a third before the month is over. If you are already subscribed to the Substack, subscribe to the Substack at Tiny Divinations. We have our monthly reading, we have our fairy tale reading, and then we have our one-off episodes. And also follow me on all the socials at Tiny Divination on TikTok and Instagram. If you have another pile, I will see you there. Thank you so much for reading with me. And if not, I will see you in your next reading. Welcome in pile 3 to your Tiny Week Ahead reading. Let's get into your cards. So, the first card you have is Braid. The next card you have is Agatha Christie, Trickery. And your last card is Bees. So the energy of your week pile 3 to me was about putting things together, right? With braids, you're literally taking different pieces of hair and putting them together. Agatha Christie was an author of um, mysteries and investigative novels. And so, again, in her stories, you're putting the pieces of the murder together, or the pieces of the robbery, or whatever it is together, right? And then with the bees had to do, in my mind, with like working and taking these little bits of pollen that you get from places and bringing them back to the hive, and again putting it all together. So there's this major energy this week for me, for y'all, of like taking different things and making something new, or putting pieces together to understand something, or forming pieces to make one thing, or like something like that. The other thing that was funny about the missing is that, like, in the clock, the first thing I noticed is that the clock goes to 10. 11 and 12 are missing. And so, again, I don't know if that has any specific meaning to anybody this week. If the numbers 11 or 12 mean anything to you, okay? But it was very interesting to me, and it went along with my theme of like putting the pieces together. It also added to the theme to me of paying attention to things. You know what I mean? In her novels, you had to pay attention to all the details so that you could figure out who done it, you know? And so that little detail in there also said to me that there's a part of this week where either we need to be paying attention to what we're doing to make sure we don't make mistakes, to make sure we're not missing anything. We need to be paying attention to what other people are doing or what's happening around us, so that we catch everything, so that we know everything that's going on, so that we are not blindsided by anything. We're paying attention to the big things and the little things, so that we can be able to put shit together later if and when we are maybe, being deceived in a way, or if we are being kept out of the loop or something like that. Okay, especially in regards to work or something that you do. You know, something that you get paid for, something that you do consistently, something like that, or something that involves a community of people. Okay, so that's part of what came up for me with these cards as well. Getting a little bit deeper into that, one of the other things that I wrote down was being having things obscured from you or hidden, lies, letting things brew. She has tea in here on this card. And so it was like letting things sit or brew to see what kind of happens, to see what shapes up, to see what comes out of it was also part of the energy that came up for me this week in these cards. So I know it's uh, a little bit interesting, a little bit all over the place, but it's definitely, I feel like, going to make sense to you as the week continues. So let's get some cards about some specific things that may happen this week. Also, before we move on, the first deck I used was the Literary Witches Oracle. I know that I always say I'm going to put it in the show notes, and sometimes I forget, or in the description, and sometimes I forget. So I just wanted to show y'all. And for this next part of the reading, I'll be using the Clarity deck and the numerolo- numerology guidance cards. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm tired. It was a long day. Okay. So let's get into some specific things that may happen this week. I'm going to start with our Clarity deck. Okay. So we have tasks. You know what? Let me turn the light on. It is very dark. Sorry, y'all. I was trying to keep all the lighting the same. Initially, when I did the first pile, it was daytime. It is no longer daytime. I was just trying to keep the lighting the same. It is what it is. Anyway, first card we have tasks. What do you tell yourself when you look at your to do list? What does this teach you about the beliefs you hold regarding your capacity, the people in your world, and what is expected of you? How is all of this keeping you stuck? Okay. The next card we have is pain. How are you relating to pain right now? With tolerance, resistance, or self pity? What is your pain trying to teach you about how you have grown over the past few years? Where do you still need to grow to get to where you want to be? We then have health and hope. What dreams do you have for yourself? In what ways do you stop yourself from dreaming before you can even start? And what are you trying to protect by doing so? Okay. Okay, so getting into the specific ways in which okay, so getting into the specific things that may happen this week, starting with the task. Yes, the task may mean that you have a lot going on this week, but I feel like more so the tasks are about you taking account of how much you have going on, how much energy you spend, if you're working harder or smarter, what that would look like if you were doing the opposite of that. You know what I mean? It also feels like part of it has to do with like doing things that you shouldn't necessarily be doing, or like doing things that you just do out of habit, but you don't really want to do. Okay. Also, with the tasks on top of the health, it has something to do with like taking account of how much you do because of how it affects you in terms of not just energetic capacity, but physical capacity, or how are the things you doing weighing on your health, or how are the things that you do help your health? Like, does it help? Does it hurt? And how do we fix that kind of thing? And so I feel like these two things kind of go together. If you're doing too much and you're always exhausted, we need to fucking take account of that. We need to change that. We need to make, executive decisions on what's more important. Is it more important you do the things, or is it more important you do it safely, or that, you are able to do it long term because you're not burning yourself the fuck out by trying to do it. You know what I mean? Or that you do it differently so that it actually is helpful to you and not more harmful to you, or however that looks, right? That's something that comes up this week. With the health by itself, there may be doctor's appointments that you have this week, or doctor's appointments you need to make this week. There may be things that you have been putting off that you need to actually sit in and look into. Because this is coming up, that may mean that these things flare up because you didn't look into it or deal with it. We also have the pain card there and for this week with the health card. So again, like things may happen where you feel pain. I'm really like feeling teeth for some reason. So there may be like some kind of tooth pain that comes up this week. Pay attention to that shit. Okay. Again, we're dealing with like tasks and energy. So it may be like exhaustion. It may be your nervous system. It may have to do with like your bones just feeling tired. You know what I mean? So like these are things that may come up this week as well. And then we have the hope card. What big dreams do you have for yourself, and what ways do you stop yourself from dreaming? I had said before, and I don't remember if I just said it in in this pile or if I said it in the one before, but there's ways in which some of us stop ourselves from doing things because you don't feel like you are supposed to, or that maybe you don't deserve that, or like it's too big for you, or you don't know if you know, and part of that is really how you see yourself, you know, and like it's like you want these things, but there's a part of you that feels like you either don't deserve these things, or you don't know if you can like own them in the way that you really should, to say I want it, to like say you want to have it. Okay. And that's something that we need to sit with and like deal with this week. That's something that's going to come up in a way this week. Either there may be a situation where you say no to something, or you pass up on something that you realize and you recognize later that you may have actually wanted, or that you think to pass things that where that happened and you're like, fuck, why didn't I do that, why didn't I take that, blah 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 blah. Or there's situations where you think to yourself like, I don't know if I'll ever have the chance to have the thing that I want, you know, but it's like you're thinking about your dreams, but you think about it more in a longing way, as opposed to a way where you are actionably trying to have that, or trying to call that into you, or juju that into your life, you know. So I feel like that's the ways that these things may play out specifically. I just want to see what this bottom card is. New skin. How are you trying to crawl into an old version of this situation that no longer fits or is no longer relevant? What needs to happen to get you to fully inhabit the new version of this situation? Okay, makes sense to me. So let's get some cards from the numerology guidance, see if there are any specific things that we are working on this week or should be working on. Doesn't feel like it. Not getting nothing. Just the things we talked about, y'all. Wait, what's this? Pride. Now, because we talked about the things we just talked about, I'm not going to take this pride as in like you have too much pride or having too much pride, but more so about sitting in your confidence and like accepting that it's okay to have pride, and that it's okay to sit with the things that you're good at. And it's okay to like stand up for yourself and sit in your confidence and believe, you know, you are who the fuck that you should think you are. Like that's pride. Not thinking about it in a negative way. It's like people a lot of times will be like, you have to kill the ego and blah blah blah. It's like, bitch, I need my ego. If you didn't need your ego, you wouldn't have one. You wouldn't be made with one. Okay. You don't want to move from places of ego, but you need your fucking ego. So don't kill that bitch. Because there's gonna be times when you need that bitch and it's not there. Okay. But anyway, this is how the pride comes up for me, in terms of it really being more so about you sitting in your own confidence and owning your shit and like standing up for yourself, even if you don't all the way know or feel that you can. It's like faking it till you make it. You smile till you're happy. You sit in your confidence until you really feel that way about yourself. Okay. And like this is part of that new skin I feel like we're taking in. And also this is where the task comes in, and you know, kind of like itemizing what we do and how we figure this out. You know what I mean? This is where that hope comes in, and you figuring out how you dream for yourself, if you dream for yourself, if you don't, how we're changing that, how the pain comes in to help you know, stop us from being able to dream, where that comes in, how that reflects to us, and then how that is either a measure of how you think about pride and ego, and or how that's a measure of how you don't have enough or sit enough in your confidence and your pride. Okay. So let's get your words of wisdom to end your reading. Okay. And our words of wisdom come from the Motivation Manifesto. So let's get you some wise words for the week. That is a lot, y'all. I'm going to go with this and this last one. Okay. We must ask if our desire to feel safe and accepted are in fact enslaving us to popular opinion or boredom. And that's funny because we got that for a different pile. And then the next one we have is our greatest personal power. is the ability to take over our impulses and direct our minds to choices and commitments that will serve us. Okay. How have you had yourself stuck in a situation? How are you trying to crawl into or staying into an old version of you? How are the tasks that you do, keeping you from utilizing your personal power, or keeping you from directing your mind or your habits or your moves in a way that actually serves you, that's keeping you from being stuck? Okay. How are you moving or sitting in your personal power that allows you to dream for yourself? And if you're not, what ways what y'all, what ways must we ask if our desire to feel safe and accepted are in fact enslaving us to popular opinion or to boredom, right? So like that goes together, this question, and then moving from this question to that, again, how does pain play in, and how can we use our pain to enhance our personal power? Okay. And then how is health affecting our abilities to take over our impulses and direct our minds? Because that's a big part of how that can be affecting you too. Because if your health ain't right and your brain is cloudy, baby, you can't make the best decisions. If you're always thinking about the future and not sitting in the present, you may make fucked up decisions for yourself now that are going to affect you in the long run. You know what I mean? So that's how that makes sense to me. These are your words of wisdom for the week, pile three. This was your weekly reading. Please let me know what you think about the reading, how your week is going. Let me know, how this shit comes up this week for you. If you'd like your own reading, book with me, wildheartbotanica.com. If you're not already, subscribe to the YouTube so you can get all the weekly readings and the other one-off readings I do. Subscribe to the Substack at Tiny Divination so you can get our monthly collective reading and our monthly fairy tale readings and our one-off podcast I do there. Follow me on all the socials at TikTok, on Instagram, on TikTok at Tiny Divinations. And thank you so much for reading with me today. I appreciate y'all so much. If you have another reading, I will see you there. If not, I will see you in your next reading.